Wow.
Let me get out of here then. You got it.
Oh, right here. Right, first person, right. Was at 10:30 was good, now they're late. Morning, Mr. Chair.
Good. You sure it's good?
Or
Are you sure it's good?
good for me, but not for the city. See, chart there. Or a microphone.
Janae, I haven't, no, I have to blather for a little bit. Janae, I haven't seen you in a while. It's good. God, you are complaining today? You are complaining today?
There's a lot of complaining to do today, sir.
What a group. What a group. We'll put out a news story about how cranky the press is today. This is secret. Are we ready? Good morning. I'm Phil Mendelson, Chair of the Council, and this is the press conference I have before our monthly legislative meeting tomorrow. Tuesday, April 1st will be a regular legislative meeting of the council. It will be preceded by a committee of the whole meeting. The committee of the whole is marking up 3 nominations by the mayor that I don't think are controversial. One is a reappointment to the Public Charter School Board. One is to the State Athletics Commission, and one is, the third is to the Students in the Care of DC Coordinating Committee. There are also a number of resolutions that have been reported out of other committees that will be on the committee, the whole agenda, plus, I believe, 3 bills. And those bills are Living Donor Protection Amendment Act from the Committee on Business and Economic Development, 1333 M Street Southeast Tax Abatement, also from the same committee, an Emergency Rental Assistance Program Reform Amendment Act of 2025 coming out of the Committee on Human Services. All of these measures will be on the legislative meeting that follows tomorrow. The legislative meeting, I'm looking at you should all have the agenda, and if you don't, then you can get it from Lindsay. That tax abatement is on non-consent. I expect that there'll probably be a couple other measures that are moved to non-consent. The Emergency Rental Assistance Program, I've heard that there might be some amendments to it. Sorry about that. Anything else you want to tell me? Can you hear me better now? Excellent. Do you want me to start over at the beginning? All right. The emergency bills, most of the emergency bills are re-upping legislation that had previously been adopted as an emergency. An exception to that, may not be the only exception, is the open meetings clarification legislation that I'm moving tomorrow. So that's the agenda. I'll be happy to answer questions in a moment. Let me give an update with regard to what's happening with the council's budget, with the city's budget. So as everybody knows, when the continuing resolution went through the House and then the Senate, there was language that had been in previous continuing resolutions or CRs that allowed the district to spend at the current year levels. That language was omitted, which has the effect of forcing the district to cut $1 billion in the remaining 6 months of this fiscal year, which is very difficult to do. The Senate saw the mistake and adopted legislation moved by Senator Collins and supported vigorously by the senators from both Virginia and Maryland. The Senate approved that unanimously. It went to the House. Unfortunately, in my view, the momentum that had ended the week was lost when Congress went on recess the following week. So now the mayor and my office have been pressing the House leadership to put this on the agenda for quick approval by the House. A concern we have is that there are always some members in the 435 members of the House who like to put amendments on bills concerning the district. And those amendments typically are troublesome and also would further delay approval of this because the bill would then, if the amendments were successful, the bill would have to go back to the Senate. And I'm not aware of any amendments, not that I have been told specifically of amendments, but some ideas. I'm not aware of any amendments that the district would support. The White House, at the time that the Senate took up this measure, the White House had indicated support. And the chair and ranking member of the House Appropriations Committee indicated support. That has not changed. The White House tweeted last Friday, I believe, that they would like to see the House move this immediately without any changes. The effect on the FY26 budget at the moment is non-existent because the FY26 budget can be developed as a balanced budget and doesn't, in terms of programmatic changes that the mayor may want to consider, that's not contingent on FY25, this FY25 issue being resolved. So the delay there is something else. However, at the point that the mayor gets to what we call pencils down and actually submits the budget to the CFO to go over in detail and certify as balanced, the CFO at that point, well, not at the beginning, but by the end, will want a supplemental for the current year that reflects current law, whatever that current law is. So ultimately, the problems in Congress are going to delay consideration of our budget. And that is a problem because there is a lot of uncertainty. People are asking me all the time. I was at a charter school event over the weekend, a rumor that the charter schools are going to have all their payments canceled, which is not correct, but there's just a lot of angst because nobody is sure what's going to happen. And it's not in our interest to develop a budget for a revised budget for the current year that reflects $1 billion in cuts, because that just will engender a whole lot of upset when we think it's probable, very likely, that we will be allowed to continue spending at the current FY25 spending levels. So there's delay and there is anxiety and it's not resolved and we would like it resolved. I will add as well that the ratings agencies who rate our debt have, two of the three have put the district on either a watch or a negative watch because of congressional actions. Not because of our actions, but because of congressional actions, which speaks to how the district is being harmed in all of this. I think I'll leave it at that, and I'm happy to take questions. Moody's and Fitch. Moody's and Fitch.
I'd like to dig deeper into why Congress not taking action will delay consideration of this next budget. Can you just flesh that out a little bit more? What would be the problem?
Well, I tried to explain that preparation of the budget, that is getting to pencils down, doesn't depend on Congress. However, at the point that the mayor submits the FY26 budget, there will undoubtedly be some changes in the FY25 budget. That would be the ordinary course, and that affects money at the end of FY25 that gets pushed to FY26. But more than that, the CFO has said that he's required to certify the mayor's budget as balanced. If the CR is not fixed, then we have to do $1 billion in cuts. And he has said he will not certify the mayor's proposed budget as balanced as long as there is a $1 billion hole that needs to be addressed. So basically, at the end of the process, before it's submitted to us, speaking for the CFO, give me a budget that's fully balanced for current year and next year. Yes.
That topic. I mean, at first you all were raising the alarm, and then after the spending bill was passed, the mayor was trying to settle the worries. But the real question, can you speak a little bit more about how long the city can really go as is if the House does not take up and pass the budget bill for DC?
Well, the alarm is real. We had that press conference in front of the Capitol. The alarm is very real. if we have to go through with these cuts, if the CR is not fixed, then we have to cut approximately $1 billion, and we have a half a year to realize what would otherwise be a full year's savings.
But by when
The
is the real question?
well, at the moment, it would be when the mayor submits the budget for next year. There is not a hard and fast deadline. However, there is a point at which we cannot continue spending at current levels. What do I mean by that? The CFO, there was a press conference with the mayor, the CFO, members of the council a couple of weeks ago. The CFO stated quite clearly that right now spending in the current fiscal year is well below the FY24 levels. When I say well below, sufficiently enough below that we don't have to stop spending or make the adjustments today. But that it's sort of, think of it as being a vice that's closing from two ends. Each day the clock is moving forward, and at some point the dollars aren't going to be there, and we'll have to act.
Can I ask you about Councilmember Trayon White, former Councilmember Trayon White?
Yes.
Indicating on Instagram, he's planning to launch his reelection today. We know you've had words on the council's investigation, but can we get your thoughts to him running again? And should he win, do you have any concerns of the impacts that could have to DC Home Rule and the relationship the city has with the Trump administration?
I think I will only speak to the moment and not speculate on hypotheticals. He, as a registered voter, is entitled to take out petitions and seek to get on the ballot for election. I realize that to a lot of members of the public, that seems shocking, but the law, which is the Home Rule Act, in other words, legislation that we cannot change, is quite clear that the disqualification is if one is convicted while in office. And as you know, there's an indictment pending, but not a conviction. So he's within his rights if he wants to, which of course sets up a newsworthy situation.
Sir, what do you think it's going to be like for members of the council working with him, given everything that happened and him trying to work with the council?
Well, I think I'll save the speculation on hypotheticals.
In that race?
I've not decided.
And at what point does it not become a hypothetical? Does he have to win
In
the
the
special
moment,
election before you will address the question that everybody is asking and you clearly have to be preparing for? I mean, you know, whether you want to talk about it or not is one thing, but at what point will you publicly talk about what your plans will be going forward should he win re-election? Would you support, once again, voting him off the council?
well, I totally get that as media, you would like a more definitive answer, but I can tell you just from my experience in government that events unfold over time. And so there's no value in my speculating today what I would do or how members would feel months from now. There is a question right here.
We complete this.
Hold on.
Will the council be considering any emergency legislation to perhaps prevent Councilmember Trayon White from running for re-election?
I don't know what that legislation would be. The Home Rule Act says that the disqualification is if one is convicted while in office.
And-
The qualifications for office are outside of our control.
And can you talk about just how unprecedented this is? Has anything to this extent ever happened before with the council?
Well, you know, every situation is unique. So yes, nothing like this has ever happened before. But then again, as I said, every situation is unique. I do have a concern, and I expressed this when the council was moving on the expulsion, that the public's impression, the image of the council is very, very important. In order to function well, government has to have the respect of its citizens. And so, you know, that obviously is implicated here.
But would you worry that respect would be lost should he win re-election?
I think I've said enough on that. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, regardless of what you may or may not do, it should former council member White win re-election and take office again. The council acted to expel him previously based on things he has done in the past. Is there any legal impediment to deciding to take that action again? Or does this wipe the slate clean and and he gets to be on the council, what is the legal field of what you can do? Can you expel him in a new term for what he did in the last term, basically what you did in January?
I don't think there's a legal bar, but I will
Matter.
add that I have not researched that, and I've not researched it because it is a hypothetical that I don't need to.
But the
address
law's
at
not
this point.
hypothetical,
Correct.
but
But
you're not aware of
interpreting the law.
anything that would keep you from doing this again, expelling him again, if that's what you want to do. There's no legal impediment. I'm not saying you're going to do it or thinking about doing it, but I just want to know what the law is. What's the playing
Yes,
field?
my answer is the same. I do not believe there's a legal bar.
Okay.
Marquez behind you.
Just going back to the budget fix with the House, you had mentioned that there was some concern that there could be some amendments thrown on there by the House. Have you heard of any potential amendments? Like, is there any specific ones you'd be concerned about being attached to that?
My staff mentioned to me one or two, which at the moment, as I'm standing here, sort of slipped my mind. I think it's too early, but I mean, just think of all the different criticisms that a small number of congressmen have made toward the district. And I would suspect that any of that could be a thought by one of the members to raise as an amendment. As I said before, I don't know of any amendments that that the district government would support for two reasons. One, because most of the amendments that come forward are not from the leadership that the mayor and my office work with. So that's a diplomatic way of speaking to how informed those amendments are with regard to the operations of the district. But then also it would further delay this legislation because now the amended bill would have to go back to the Senate.
And on Friday, I know that the president, or really Thursday night into Friday, we saw that executive order from the president creating that task force to make DC
Yes.
safe and beautiful again. Any response to that? I know there's no local council members, elected officials on that task force. What's your reaction to that?
I really can only speak for myself, although I have had conversations with other colleagues. It's always unsettling when there is a proposal from the federal government to do something with regard to the district. If you look at the executive order more closely, you will see that, for example, directing the Park Service to make its parks more attractive. Well, it is their property. I don't know that that's objectionable. I don't want to say that everything in there is innocuous, but overall, a lot of it, if not most of it, is directives to the federal government to do things that are within the federal government's purview, not as a home rule, let's step on home rule, but as in a, let's maintain our parks or maintain our buildings or work with the city.
The declaration facts of it say that the task force will work with the Metropolitan Police Department and the union of the police department to decide what to do about staffing and other issues. That's not a federal issue. That's a direct assault on home rule.
Well, saying to work with us. So, you know, if you want me to say a little bit more, I would say that some of the language around the order I disliked. But the order itself, the directives in the order were as I described. So if you ask me if I would like to see an executive order, no. But that wasn't the question. Yes.
To the budget, the city administrator is saying that they need clarity from Congress on a legislative fix to the CR before submitting the
Yeah,
balanced
yeah,
budget.
yeah.
So how
Yeah.
this wait and see period, how does that impact the council's ability to legislate? And are there concerns? I know you said there's no hard and fast deadline as far as when it's an issue that the House hasn't voted yet, but are there concerns if this doesn't happen sooner, how that can impact your ability to legislate?
There are concerns that if this drags on, that it will make the operation of the government more difficult, and that there might come a point where we have to do the $1 billion in cuts. So that is a concern. I think I've been pretty consistent here that we want this to happen as quickly as possible, that it is ultimately delaying our budget. Let me be clear again. The mayor has to give us two documents. She has to give us a budget for FY26, and she has to give us a revised budget for the current year. She does this every year. And nothing new, nothing unusual about that. The CFO has told her that she has to give the CFO 10 days, pencils down, and then 10 days. There's nothing that stops her from getting to pencils down on either of those bills. And we know what that supplemental, when I say we know, I don't really mean me, she should know what it looks like, because that would be in the ordinary course of things. With the CR, there would have to be, unless it's fixed, a supplemental with $1 billion in cuts. It's not in anyone's interest to develop such a budget and put it out. So at the point that she's gotten the pencils down, we are going to have to figure out how long we're going to have to wait with the House. And that's where the delay could come in, after the pencil's down.
Okay, but she's saying, it sounds like they're not.
I know
doing
what she's
pencil-
saying, because it's convenient to say that the congressional uncertainty is delaying pencils down.
So are you saying that she should come up with two versions of the budget? One for if the
For the
Senate bill.
FY26 budget, no. For the revised budget for the current year, we're trying to avoid that.
Okay, and then back to ex-councilmember Tran White, what would be your message to the people of Ward 8 amid everything that's going on? And can you talk about how the council has still been representing them, even in the council member's absence? With everything going on in
Well,
relation to his reelection campaign?
I think that's a circuitous way of getting at whether I would endorse anybody. I mean, people should vote, people should participate, people should look at all the candidates. That's what I would say. What was the other part of your question?
If you can reiterate how the council.
Oh, yeah,
has
so I have maintained the Ward 8 Constituent Services Office. So residents of Ward 8 still have a Ward 8 phone number that they can call if they have a issue with city services and need some help. In addition, all of the at-large members represent the citizens of Ward 8. So every one of the at-large members is available if residents of Ward 8 are looking for help with services or want to comment on issues pending before the council. I believe at the moment, yes, but that will change shortly.
How will that change? When will that change?
Not all of them will continue on the payroll.
They'll be let go? Are they actually working? Have they been redeployed somewhere else? What are they doing?
When it used to be that when a member left office for whatever reason, that their staff immediately becomes unemployed. It's been my practice to always pick up the staff to give them some time to find other work. So for example, I know that the council member's former chief of staff has found other work and has left the office. I did give all of the members of the staff a time certain, and that is approaching. There
is
will
that
be
date?
a couple that I will be keeping on to work on constituent services for the ward.
So what is the date that you gave them?
I'm not certain, so I'm not going to put it out. Well, I can give you an answer, but it may not be accurate. I'm going to say around 10. And you can quote me on that, but it may not be accurate. It might be 8, might be 7, might be 11. Jenny?
Just to go back to the budget timing, just so I'm really clear, did you say that the CFO gave a directive to the mayor that he wanted both the FY25 supplemental and the FY26 at the same time? Or could the mayor just submit the FY26 and then wait on the supplemental because of the uncertainty in Congress?
It's more the latter.
Okay.
So I've spoken to the CFO, and in the conversation, it was clear that the pencils down for FY26 is not contingent on the supplemental being submitted at the same time. However, the CFO's position is that at the point that the FY26 is submitted to the council, the CFO has to also have the supplemental.
Okay, so basically they're both going to the council at the same time
They would be
anyway.
submitted to the council at the same time, but they don't have to be submitted to the CFO at the same time.
Okay, got
Which
it.
is to say that the roughly $20 billion budget for next year can move forward more quickly.
Okay. And can you just like explain what the effect of this delay has on council staff, on the sort of budget process? Will it be more rush? Will it have any substantive impact on how that process looks?
Well, really, nothing has changed since the press conference the mayor had a couple weeks ago. But as I said, think of it as being like a vice with the clock ticking. That's one side of the vice. And at some point, our spending reaches a level where, because of the CR, if it's unfixed, that we then have to make changes.
Okay.
So that vice is closing, which is why we want this taken care of immediately.
Okay. And if folks are ready to move on to the Open Meetings Act changes,
Can I vote on whether I'm ready to move on? Yes, Mr.
So the CFO has said that you're still below spending. Current spending can continue at this level because you're below. He refused, despite multiple requests from press, to give a date certain on when that would end. Has he told you
No.
when he hasn't given you any indication?
not a
If the
date
House doesn't
certain.
take any action at all, at what point would DC have to take action as if the CR is in effect?
He has not given a date, and I think it would be very hard to come up with a date, as much as everybody would like a date.
And then
It's just the way it is.
Okay, and then since the microphone's here, I'll take the first shot at this open meetings law. Can you explain?
Jenny might.
Well, that's
take
fine.
the
She
first
can
shot.
ask. I don't care who asks. I just want to hear you. So can you explain to us the need, whose proposal was this? Was this your idea? Whose idea was this? What is the emergency? And can you tell us why you need to make this, what seems to a lot of us in this room, very drastic changes to the open meetings law without any public input on an emergency basis?
Let me see, there were about 4 or 5 questions in there, and I'm not going to try to remember them all, so you may have to repeat some. The legislation was co-introduced by all the members.
Yeah, we can read the document. Whose
Yes.
idea was it? Was it your idea? Did it come from the mayor?
I would say it's been gestating for a couple of years, and a number of members have brought it up. I can't put a finger on one member. I'm the one who I believe put it on the agenda for tomorrow, yes. Mr. Sherwood, that was a cranky
Mr. Chairman,
question.
why don't you just take
So-
credit for your shutting down the public access to the council?
so-
When the president
The question,
of the United States is
Mr.
taking over our
Sherwood,
city,
can you hear
you're
me
making
okay?
it harder for the public to know what the council is.
Mr. Sherwood, can you hear me okay? So the question was,
Sound
whose
good?
idea was it? That was the question, whose idea was it? The question wasn't who's moving it tomorrow. And you know the answer, who's moving it tomorrow, because my name is next to it and I put out the notice. There are 12 members on it, that's all the members. All the members have indicated they support it. So that's a fuller answer to where did this come from? My answer also was that over the last couple of years, a number of different members have brought this up. So that suggests it's more than one person.
If I can just summarize Seagrave's question, why do you need a blanket, unconditional ability to have a private meeting with the mayor or with among the council members without making some public record that you're doing it?
Well, I don't think it's a blanket, unconditional, broad. I saw the letter from the Open Government Coalition today, who says this legislation isn't necessary because all of it can be done now, which of course makes me wonder why folks are upset about it. So let me say this. I have been active with elected officials in the region through the Council of Governments. I have been involved with elected officials throughout the country in various capacities that I've served on, such as the Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations, which deals with transportation, or the National League of Cities, or the National Conference of State Legislatures. I have spoken to colleagues in other states and cities over the years, and there is constantly a complaint that the ability to have a conversation just a conversation is impeded. And that's what this legislation gets to. It doesn't close the meetings where action is taken. In fact, it preserves most of the existing law. It's a gross overstatement to say that this is a mass change.
Mr. Chairman.
But for example, a year ago, if I could finish, a year ago, one of the council committees wanted to take a field trip, and was told that they could not do it because that would violate open meetings. There would have to be a notice and an opportunity for the public to attend for a field trip to go and look at, and this was not a field trip to the zoo. This was actually to look at public housing projects. And that should not be impeded by the requirement that it has to be open to however many scores of public want to attend the field trip or members of the press.
Meetings with the mayor. And again, can you tell us, you just said that this has been percolating with the DC Council for 2 years and multiple members have brought it up. So if it has been on your radar for 2 years, why then can you not have a public hearing and go through the normal process of legislating this? Why do you see the need to do this as an emergency? What is the emergency?
Mark, I'm looking at page 3 of the open meetings letter that came today, and it talks about field trips and retreats. So yes, the bill does deal with field trips and retreats.
Great. So what is the emergency, sir?
Great.
It's not something to laugh about. What is the
Well, I think
emergency?
you
You're
overstated
passing
your
this on an
case.
emergency basis. What is the emergency?
That members want to be able to have discussions now. And when we have had
But this has been
discussion-
going on for years by your own admission.
You want
So
me to
what is the
finish?
emergency?
Do you want me to answer your question?
Please.
Members want to be able to discuss, have conversations now. And when we do it, which we have done, we have been challenged as to the legality. As much as the open meeting letter says, not true, we can do it. In fact, we get challenged. And if I remember correctly, the law starts out by saying that the act is to be construed as broadly as possible. So this is a clarification bill. Open meeting says on the one hand that we could do a field trip, or we could have a meeting to discuss confidential negotiations with regard to economic development. On the other hand, we get challenged, and I would rather clarify the law with regard to this than to continue with this uncertainty.
That's great. So why the emergency? So you have not made a case for an emergency. What you've made
No,
a
no,
case
I've not
for, what
persuaded
you've made
you.
a case for is having stakeholders weigh in and be able to give their side of the story and for you guys to make an educated decision on something that affects every single DC resident. Again, you have not given reason to an emergency. You talk about economic development. So I'll ask you, you did this, you circumvented this when it came to Monumental, with the negotiations of Monument.
You think we broke the law?
I did not say you broke the law. I said you
circumvented-
circumvented it.
you
It's a difference.
circumvented.
I didn't say you broke the law. I said you circumvented the law while still working within the boundaries of the law by bringing people in
think
groups. So,
circumventing
how much of this
suggests
has
we
to
broke
do
the
with
law.
your ongoing negotiations with the commanders? Is this just that the commanders thing is heating up and is getting so close to the finish line or the goal line that you want to be able to get briefed on it immediately, and that the commanders negotiation is the emergency, that the NFL has told you or the mayor that they don't want these meetings and discussions open to the public?
It's interesting you would read football into it. I'm thinking a few other things I could read into it. So I already answered the question why. You don't like the answer. Let's just remember that when somebody asks a question and they don't like the answer, that doesn't mean that they weren't given an answer. So members would like to be able to have these conversations now. We had a retreat last Friday. I would say luckily, nobody showed up, so we were able to have confidential discussions. But we would not have been able, yes, talk to the secretary. It was an open. Tom, Tom, that is totally cranky. So the secretary announced the meeting and we had the meeting. Last week, I'm not sure when. Please, please. The fact that you're not aware doesn't mean that it wasn't noticed. No, correct.
Mr. Chairman,
You're being a little unreasonable, Mr. Sherwood. Am I supposed to
Mr.
know?
Chairman, peace and blessings, if I may, I'm just getting here, if I may,
Why am I supposed to know?
Mr. Chairman.
I don't put out the notice. I was assured by the secretary that there was notice.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I have a question as well. I have a question,
Yeah.
just following up on what's been
I hope you're
discussed.
not as cranky.
Anyway, following up on what I discussed, what's the threshold here? So once this emergency legislation passes, I'm just trying to get clarity around to what degree can the council exercise that power in blocking people's view or, listening in on meetings? I'm just trying to get clarity around that. And in regards to the 2-year timeline, what was the rationale, again, in making it an emergency rather than going through the process? Already seeing that some organizations have already caught wind of it and like they're already sending letters in opposition. Why not just have that process open over the last 2 years? So I sort of got two questions. The threshold, right? At what point is the council unable to block meetings? And secondly, why not just open up the process over the last 2 years for public input?
I'm not sure I understand the second. Again, members want to be able to have conversations. I said conversations, not votes, not taking action, and they're constrained from doing that. And this has been an especially sensitive time this past year and currently. I'm thinking because somebody mentioned Monumental and the negotiations that went on there, and members have been constrained. And as much
If I
as
may,
some folks protested, well, actually, we can do these discussions anyway. In fact, we get challenged on that. So this is a clarification. That answers the first part. What was the second part of your question?
well, I just want to focus on the first part, and I'm going to, at the risk of sounding cranky or whatever, our readership at The Informer are people who are very skeptical of government, people who have every reason to believe, based on their conditions, that government does not work in their favor. So I'm asking this question with that context. What do you say, especially given now that there's a former council member White and all the at-large council members are working overtime to fill that gap? What do you say to constituents that you're further impeding their view and knowledge of meetings, especially at a time when people aren't voting like they should be? Voting numbers aren't up like they should be. I can't quite recall the percentage, but it's not 100%. And part of that comes from skepticism and defeatism about the system. So I'm just trying to get a sense of if by any chance that went through your mind as you were doing this, or if there were more, dare I say, nefarious intentions involved.
Well, first I'll deny the nefarious, but I would say that there are two aspects to the current law. One of them is that actions that the council and other government bodies take, actions have to be open to the public. And the other is conversations by elected officials have to be open to the public. This is meant to provide some measure of relief with regard to conversations. The reality is that conversations do not occur because members do not want to have them in a public setting. That could be a meeting where I am so angry at a colleague that I want to come in and tell him, I'll even say, I won't say, that I want to have a frank conversation with a colleague, and I won't do that in front of the other members. And there may be a value to that. That's maybe not a good example, but it's an example. Or last year, I had my lawyer look at this, so I believed that it was legal, but I, at the last minute, had a gathering in my office to discuss where things were between the executive and Monumental Sports. And to have noticed that meeting, I assure you that every one of you and double would have been there and known that there were these discussions, which were confidential. And as I said, I talked to my lawyer and we believe it was legal, but we were challenged nonetheless. And that's to illustrate the kind of constraint. I'm told I have 5 minutes.
A member of this council and just a general member of the public, would you be okay with this bill?
This bill is not as damaging to the Open Meetings Act as all of you are suggesting. And the Open Meetings Act is far more open than what the law was for the first 40 years of home rule.
So you're okay with it?
We're having a public hearing today.
Well, as you know, we will have a public hearing.
There be permanent legislation?
Yes,
Will you have a public hearing? for the
Yes.
Permanent legislation?
yes, there will
When
be
does
a
that
hearing
come?
on the permanent bill.
When would that come?
I do not know.
Later this year? I mean, this year?
Tom, the permanent bill was introduced on Friday. So I have not looked at a schedule for when that hearing will be.
So
There
you
will
can't
be a
commit to
hearing.
Having a public hearing on
Can I finish?
secrecy of the council
Can I finish?
until next year.
So if I could finish, there will be a public hearing on the permanent bill.
This year?
I see no reason for delay. I just don't know when.
Mr. Chairman, this is.
I can't answer every question, Tom. What are you having for breakfast in 2 days?
Personal exception where council members can meet in any configuration, what you want to do, and we will not know, we, the public, will not know anything about it. And you seem to think that's good. We're not talking about a field trip to the National Zoo. We're talking about discussions with the football team that wants to move here and all kinds of other issues. And there's been no public record. You even changed the law so there won't be any public record.
I'm not sure there should be a public record of a conversation. So the
But you just
policy,
talk about just announcing your meeting. You can,
The-
under the current law, you can declare any meeting you want to do. You just have to vote on it. Why does it have to be a universal exception?
the Open Meetings Act of 2010 expanded the policy in essence to include conversations, not just actions by public officials. While this seemed innocuous when enacted, time after time, we have found this to impede deliberations. For example, when the Housing Committee wanted to conduct a field trip to visit public housing projects, it was told it couldn't unless it provided public notice and allowed members of the public and reporters to join. When I offered a sudden, unplanned briefing for council members of the confidential negotiations between the executive and Monumental Sports, I was challenged for violating the Open Meetings Act for not giving public notice or allowing the public to attend. Our ability to meet to discuss political strategy to best inform members of Congress about our appropriations is constrained because we don't want these conversations to be public. Our ability to hold a retreat where members can informally discuss their personal views affecting policy is arguably prohibited, and we no longer have monthly mayor council breakfasts because neither side wants to publicly air disagreements. For instance, allow the council to publicly and personally question and argue with the mayor over something she is or is not doing. I'm reading from an email I sent to members. Yes. How many minutes? I have 2 minutes.
Can we touch on the?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Let him finish.
There's a gentleman I recognized.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on the ERAP bill before we finished.
No,
But, he said there's
No.
2 minutes left. This bill is being voted on tomorrow.
okay, come on, y'all. Let's get along better. Yes, sir.
So you have the ERAP bill on the agenda for tomorrow, permanent
Yes.
bill of the emergency one
Mhm.
that passed. The committee report acknowledged that the emergency bill has been effective, but it also made a few changes to the bill. I won't get into the details, but I've heard from multiple real estate industry groups. They say they oppose these changes and they would undermine the purpose of the bill. So do you support the version that came out of the committee, or do you want to see amendments to walk back some of those changes?
To be honest with you, I spent about an hour on Friday looking at the bill and didn't come to a conclusion where I am on it. But I believe that Councilmember Fruman is considering some amendments that would make changes to, I believe, the changes you're referring to. So it's still in a state of flux. I will note this was adopted on an emergency basis in October, which is not unusual for us to do. And the permanent bills had a hearing and is coming up for first reading tomorrow.
Mhm.
Did that answer your question? Thank you. Yes, sir. I'll come to you next, Janae.
Are there specific economic development projects that you and other members of the council want to be able to discuss confidentially?
The one that I mentioned is the one that I've thought of, which is Monumental Sports a year ago.
But I mean, moving forward, is there a
Well,
specific
Mark
project in
suggested-
mind that is informing this?
Mark suggested the football stadium. I can tell you that the mayor has not reached out to my office to discuss it, so there are no discussions in the,
But
in the
this bill
foreseeable.
would cover that, right?
If it was,
Cover it.
if it was a gathering of members, a gathering of more than 7 members to,
Chairman.
well, my point, Tom, my point is that the mayor's not discussed this with me one-on-one, let alone asked to discuss it with the council. So the commanders is not on my list. I mentioned Monumental Sports. I'm just answering your question.
It
Could be.
Not that it is now, but it could be.
Janae was next.
Okay.
Y'all
You-
are
you
working
s-
me
I
hard
just
here.
asked, you said you had a meeting. No one showed up, you had the meeting. What does that mean?
We had a retreat on Friday and it was noticed. Lindsay, did you get to,
So how does? the
not May
public-
11th? Yeah, Tom,
So
did you
what
hear
does that
that?
mean?
how
No,
do we- how
It
do-
was
how does the
posted on
public know
March-
to look
Can
at- How does the public know that that's there?
I just don't get it. No one showed up, you had a meeting. What does that mean?
What was your question?
What does
You know,
that mean?
Tom, the fact that you don't look at places as a reporter where we post notices is a little bit shocking.
I didn't say I didn't look.
You said no one showed up, you had a meeting. Who'd you have the meeting with?
There were 12 members present.
And
It
who-
was a retreat. We do this every March.
Okay.
It was 12 members and then we had several guests come in and speak to us.
And what was the topic?
Mostly economic development.
Was it commanders or something
Hmm?
else? Was it commanders or
This seems to be expanding on a theme. No,
Was it
commanders
firm,
was
maybe?
not discussed.
Okay, I have a question. How did you model this bill? What did you model off of?
I would not say modeled out off of anything other than experience.
You
As I
talked
said,
to-
members have been complaining for a couple of years about constraints. And so that was what informed the bill.
But you've seen other cities, other states. What did you model it off of? Did you
I-
not model it off
I
of
just
other places?
answered you.
It wasn't inspired by other laws or other cases.
Correct. However, as I indicated, I've had conversations with state legislators in Florida and in Denver and in San Francisco and in Cleveland and Indianapolis and in the state of New Hampshire, and it's a long list.
How much does the
2 more
consternation, well,
questions.
just
2 more
one more, I have
questions.
one
Mark?
more, excuse me. Just, I'm curious, how much of the consternation under Trump is fueling the need for having these secret meetings?
I would not say it's
Okay, well,
irrelevant.
don't pick on that
Mark?
and not answer, please. I mean, how
Mark?
much? is climate Trump?
I just answered your question.
Well,
Mark?
no, actually, here's a good question, because you alluded to that when I asked about football. You said, so I'm paraphrasing, you said, oh, it's interesting you bring up football.
Those are
I would have
really
thought of
different-
other things that.
That's really difficult. So I already said it's not irrelevant. That
It's
was
not
my
making
answer.
it easy on
Mark?
you to
Mark?
to shut out the public, but that's what our job is here, sir.
I get it.
And for you to call us cranky
get
and be dismissive of our questions is rather insulting,
Okay.
all right? So let me
Well,
ask you this.
To call me,
Will the pre-legislative breakfast be open to the press and the public if this is passed?
I would like it to be.
You would like it to be. What does that mean? That's not a definitive
I'm
answer.
the chair of the council.
What's that?
I am the chair of the council. I would like the breakfasts to remain open.
How about the meetings between the council and the mayor?
I would like those to be, for the most part, closed.
You would like those to be closed?
Correct.
Why? What is the difference? And I got to tell you, I've been to a few of those meetings.
Gentlemen,
It seems
gentlemen,
pretty candid.
we no longer have
council member
monthly
being
mayor
restrained.
council breakfasts because neither side wants to publicly
But
air
that's just not- that's
disagreements.
just not- I just-
For
that's not-
instance,
that's not
allow the
reality,
council to
sir.
publicly
That's not what we
impersonate,
expect
question,
you
and
to
argue
do.
with the mayor over something she is or is not doing.
You can read that all day long. That's not what we experience.
I
We see
said 2 more, but Martin deserves, Martin, I got it. Martin,
All right, just real quickly. So you mentioned this field trip that the council couldn't do. Notice is 48 hours. Like, are you telling us that the council couldn't notice something for 2 days because they were afraid that people are going to flock to a field trip to view public housing? Just out of curiosity, number one, that. Number two, Open Meetings Act also mentions quorum. I mean, you could have meetings with 5 members at a time And you don't have to cite, you don't have to mention it to anybody else. You don't have to open it to the press. or the
Well, that's
public.
if it's committee of the whole, but if it's the housing committee, which has 5 members, then it's 3. So.
But the point being, 48 hours notice is not, I mean, we're not talking weeks of heads up.
Well, think back a couple of years ago when public housing was very much in the news and very controversial. And the committee says we're going to do a field trip to look at some public housing projects with the chair of the board and with the executive director of the authority. And what are the chances that there would be a lot of other folks who are interested because it's been very much in the news who want to join, in which case it's no longer a field trip of 3 members. It's now, I don't know, 15, 20. What if the committee of the whole wants to have a tour of a school? Eagle Academy closed last August suddenly. And so this doesn't quite work in the hypothetical, but so I'm going to do a field trip of Eagle Academy, and all the parents, 150 parents, want to show up. I can't have a conversation with the head of school. It's going to be a town hall meeting, which is fine, but a town hall meeting is not the same as a field trip. So members have got to be, if they want to go and look at something, when I go and tour the forensic lab, if I want to bring colleagues, and there's a quorum, under the current law, arguably, I'm going to say arguably, I would have to have notice. And then everybody would be, anybody who wanted to could come. And that's very different. Try to fit 20, 25 people into one of the labs over at the forensic lab. So this is just difficult. It constrains. And as I said before, it's one thing to say that we can't take action except at a public meeting. It's another thing to say we can't have any conversations unless it's noticed in a public meeting. That's just really difficult. And I've given you examples. You didn't like the examples. I have talked with legislators in other cities and states. They all have lots of examples. It is really hard on legislators to be able to talk to each other because of these constraints. That's all this does, is to make it easier for us to have conversations, not take action, but to have conversations. Jenny.
To revisit the portion of your email that you quoted where you talked about how you no longer have these mayor council breakfast meetings because people are afraid to have disagreements publicly. And I guess I think people run for office because they have ideas that they want to share. And shouldn't it be a basic expectation that someone who's an elected official is comfortable having a disagreement in public with the mayor?
No,
Why not?
because there are times when you don't want the disagreement to be public, as I think you know. If that's what it is, a disagreement, yes. I remember years ago with a former mayor and another former mayor who was on the council, and he asked to clear the room. This was before open meetings. He asked to clear the room to talk about how the former mayor was disrespecting the council. That would have been totally newsworthy. And the idea was to, before it becomes more of an open conflict, to have a quiet conversation in front of other members about this. Those conversations can't occur in an open meeting. Sorry, but they just can't. Lindsay.
People having a field trip to the office district, vote that it be closed, right?
Lindsay, where are we? Well, that's because you want me to agree with you. Even though as press, you're supposed to be asking questions, not arguing with. Yes. Huh?
It mentions monitoring DC's cooperation with federal immigration authorities. Is this legal?
Yeah, because she said about 15 minutes ago, 5 minutes. Immigration enforcement.
Yeah, under President Trump's executive order, it mentions monitoring DC's cooperation with federal immigration authorities.
Yes. As
Is
you
that
know,
legal?
most of the executive orders have language in it that says as allowed by law or as appropriate under existing law. And it has been our position that we will comply with the law.
So which?
I was not
law?
close to the microphone. Well,
Will you be complying to DC's law as it stands? Do you plan on following the executive order if it involves, let's say, MPD helping out with immigration enforcement?
I think some of that you have to ask the mayor, because MPD works for the mayor, not for the council. But in my conversations, we're quite clear that we will follow the law with regard to immigration enforcement. And if the law changes, we'll follow the law with regard to immigration enforcement. Jenny was last. I just said the law, whatever the law is.
I have a question related to Ms. Wright and her reconfirmation. So given what happened to Eagle Academy, because you did bring it up not too long ago in its closure, I'm just trying to get your take or just get a sense of what conversations were had about Mrs. Wright's stewardship of the public charter school board while Eagle Academy was allowed to recertify or I guess renew its charter only to be closed shortly after.
We've had a hearing. I sent a long letter with questions back in October. There has been, I meet monthly with the Public Charter School Board, the executive director. We had a performance oversight hearing, which is separate from the hearing specifically on Eagle Academy. Eagle has come up at every one of these meetings or hearings, and we have talked about what the board is doing to change its oversight, adding rigor to its oversight with regard to schools that are have some warning signs with regard to their finances.
So given all
And
that's
that has
happened-
included conversations, some of it has included conversations with Chantel Wright. I think the issue here is the board and the staff in totality, not any one individual. I've seen nothing that points to one individual who says they were culpable.
So like not even any questions about her stewardship of the board or just about how under her leadership it allowed Eagle Academy to renew its charter. I'm just trying to make sense, just trying to get.
Well, as you know, it renewed its charter like a year before it collapsed.
Right.
Now, there were warning signs. In my view, the staff did not act more aggressively with regard to the warning signs, but there's been no testimony that suggests that Chantel Wright is individually responsible. And I would add, I don't believe she became chair of the board until last year, which was like maybe just a couple of months before Eagle collapsed.
So in terms of that, what's your vision as far as ensuring that there's more transparency and more accountability for charter schools?
Well, the board has made a number of changes, so it's publishing on its website in a way that's more accessible. I'm not saying it's accessible enough, but publishing on its website financial information about schools, that is, schools that are on a watch list. And we have a bill pending in the council that would require training of board members so that they understand their responsibility and how to ask more rigorous questions. Part of the problem with Eagle was that the chief executive officer and the chief financial officer were the same person. And I have to conclude that the board did not understand that that is bad financial practice and that they could have stepped in and said no. And I think they didn't understand that. Maybe I'm wrong. And so that's what the board training bill's about. I think we're done. Thank you all very much.